What happens when a shy girl with a painful past steps into an elevator and unknowingly stands beside the most powerful billionaire in the city? She didn't know who he was. He didn't expect to notice her. But in 90 seconds, everything changed. New York City, Monday, 7:55 a.m. The hum of the city was just beginning to rise. Like a giant breathing in, car horns echoed off skyscrapers. Taxis whirred past with barely a pause, and people moved with purpose as if they were all racing towards something invisible but vital. Among them was Lena Park, 24 years old, soft-spoken, and unnoticed. She stood in front of the towering skyscraper that pierced the city skyline, the Helix building, home to the headquarters of Magnar Holdings, the most influential firm in the tech finance sector. It was her first day as an assistant to a designer, a job she had dreamed about, but never thought she'd land. Not with her background. Lena adjusted the strap of her bag and looked up at the building that seemed to rise forever. The glass gleamed like armor under the morning sun. Her reflection stared back at her, small, plain, slightly anxious. "Get it together," she whispered to herself. She was wearing a pale beige blouse and a long navy skirt, safe, modest. Her thick black hair was pulled into a low bun, and her round glasses sat perfectly on her small nose. Everything about her said, "Keep going. Don't cause waves," and that's how she liked it. The moment she entered the revolving doors, the cold air and scent of polished marble hit her like a wall. People in sleek suits and designer shoes glided across the expansive lobby, their eyes locked on their phones, their expressions unreadable. Lena felt like she had wandered into another planet, one built by confidence and money. "Excuse me," she said softly to the receptionist, who barely glanced up. "Employee ID," the woman said curtly, her nails clacking on her keyboard. Oh, I'm Lena Park. It's my first day. I was told to go to floor 47, department," the woman interrupted. "Creative strategy team." The receptionist's eyes scanned her quickly, then handed her a guest badge. "Elevators to your left. Take the one marked A, floor 47. Lena nodded and whispered, "Thank you," even though the woman was already ignoring her. Her hands were damp with nerves as she approached the bank of elevators. Each one looked like a vault door to a secret world. A group of well-dressed men and women waited by elevator A, tapping shoes and muttering into AirPods. As she waited, her mind swirled with every insecurity. What if they made a mistake hiring me? What if I mess up today? What if I don't belong here? Ding. The elevator doors slid open. A dozen people stepped inside, including Lena. She pressed the button for 47 and moved to the corner, tucking herself out of sight. The mirrored walls reflected her uncertainty. At the 10th floor, a few people exited, and 3 more entered. The last person to step in was a tall man in a black overcoat, tailored suit underneath, and a presence so distinct that even the previously unbothered employees subtly straightened their postures. He was broad-shouldered, effortlessly composed, and had salt and pepper hair swept neatly back. His sharp jawline and quiet confidence made him look like someone important. Lena didn't know who he was, but everyone else clearly did. She found herself pushed further into the corner. As the elevator filled again, the man stood to her right, close, but not too close. He smelled faintly of cedar and something warm, like fresh rain. Then the elevator shuddered, jolting violently. Lights flickered. A collective gasp filled the space, and then silence. The elevator had stopped. People froze. Someone muttered a curse. A young man tried pressing the buttons repeatedly. No response. Then a crackly voice came over the intercom. "Apologies for the inconvenience. We're experiencing a technical delay. Our engineers are working to resolve the issue. Estimated wait time, 15 to 20 minutes. Please remain calm." That's when Lena's chest tightened. Not this, not a closed space, not again. Memories surged of being locked in a basement closet when she was 9, during an earthquake back in Seoul. She had screamed for help, cried until her throat was raw. Since then, confined spaces had become her silent nightmare. She gripped her tote bag tightly. Her breathing grew shallow, her vision blurred slightly at the edges. "You okay?" The voice was low and kind. Lena turned and looked up. It was the man beside her. His green eyes, striking and calm, were focused entirely on her. I'm fine, she said automatically, trying to steady herself. He raised an eyebrow. You're not. He didn't say it as a judgment, just a fact. I just don't. Like small spaces, she admitted, swallowing hard. Breathe with me, he said, his tone gentle but steady. In, hold, out, he demonstrated slowly. Lena followed, shakily at first. In, hold, out, again, and again. Soon, the dizziness began to fade. There you go, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. She gave a nervous laugh. Thank you. That actually helped. I've been there, he replied. You learn to ride the panic, not fight it. There was a quiet wisdom in his voice, not condescending, just real. The other passengers resumed their hushed conversations, but Lena stayed quiet beside him. Oddly, she felt safer now. First day, he asked, nodding at her badge. She blinked. Is it that obvious? He chuckled. You're clutching your bag like it holds national secrets. She relaxed, just a bit. It holds snacks and imposter syndrome. That made him laugh, a deep, warm laugh that made others turn and glance. It was rare to see him laugh. I'm Lena, by the way, she said, trying to match his calm. He looked at her thoughtfully, then said simply, Daniel. She didn't know that Daniel Rain was more than just a name. He was the CEO of Motivational Holdings, the founder, the billionaire visionary, a man who had once disappeared from the public eye after a tragic loss, only to come back even stronger. His name was whispered in Forbes articles, industry talks, and boardroom legends, and yet, here he was talking her through a panic attack in an elevator. They spoke quietly for the rest of the time about where she was from, a small town near Buffalo, how she got the job, an internship turned miracle, and what inspired her late mother, an artist who painted beauty from brokenness. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He asked about her favorite book, her dreams, and not once did he check his phone. 20 minutes later, the elevator hummed back to life. Lena exhaled with relief as it resumed its climb. When it reached the 47th floor, the doors opened. She turned to Daniel, smiling nervously. Thank you. Again, I really don't know what I would have done, Lena, he said, interrupting gently. You're going to do well here, I can already tell. And just like that, she stepped out. A moment later, as the elevator doors closed again, a young analyst turned to Daniel. Sir, you didn't tell her who you are. Daniel smiled to himself. She didn't need to know. People said the first week on a new job was all about keeping your head down, avoiding mistakes, and learning who to smile at in the hallway. Lena tried to do all of those things. She arrived early, stayed late, and said yes to everything, even when her hands shook over the keyboard or she had no idea how to format a file correctly. But what she hadn't expected was seeing him again. It was Tuesday, just the second day. She was balancing a tray of coffees she had volunteered to get for the team, when she heard the soft ding of an elevator door opening behind her. She stepped aside without turning around, focusing on not spilling anything. A voice came from over her shoulder. Careful, the coffee's trembling more than your hands. She froze, turning slowly. Lena blinked. There he was. Daniel. Same composed presence, same gentle humor in his eyes. You again, she said, trying to hide her surprise. Looks like you survived the first day, he said. Barely, she admitted, her face warming. Good. He nodded. That means you're in the right place. Before she could respond, one of the senior strategists from her team passed by and greeted him with a stiff nod. Good morning, Mr. Rain. Lena's breath caught. Rain. She turned to look at Daniel again, this time with new eyes. No, it couldn't be. She blinked rapidly, remembering the articles she had skimmed in the days leading up to her first day. Motivational Holdings CEO, Daniel Rain, a tech visionary, private, intense, mysterious. She had imagined someone with a colder aura, someone unreachable, someone who didn't guide new hires through breathing exercises and stalled elevators. You're him? She asked quietly. Daniel looked slightly amused. You say that like I'm a ghost. I didn't know. I didn't tell you, he said simply. Sometimes it's nice not being the title. She didn't know what to say, so she just offered him one of the untouched coffees on the tray. You drink coffee, right? She asked. I do, he replied. "But I don't usually get it hand-delivered." "Well," Lena said, managing a smile, "then consider this a thank you." He accepted the cup and said something that stuck with her all day. "You don't owe me anything, Lena, but keep being the person who offers coffee anyway." That sentence echoed in her mind long after he disappeared down the hallway. By Friday, her nerves had started to settle, and her ideas were slowly being taken seriously by her team. She was still shy, still soft-spoken, still double-checking every email 3 times before hitting send, but she was standing a little straighter, and she had started smiling at the receptionist. What she didn't know was that someone was watching, not in a creepy way, not with ulterior motives, just observing. Daniel had a habit of noticing things others didn't. He noticed that Lena held the elevator for others, even when she was late. He noticed how she truly listened when others spoke. He noticed how she wrote notes on paper instead of on her phone, how her handwriting tilted slightly left like it was leaning into the future. He noticed her sketching quietly in the break room on lunch breaks, always in pencil, always with soft lines. Most people in the company moved quickly, efficiently, and loudly. But Lena moved like she didn't want to disturb the world, and yet, the quiet she carried made people feel safe. He remembered what that felt like. On Friday afternoon, as the office emptied for the weekend, Lena stayed behind, working late to finish a design pitch. The office was nearly silent when she heard the soft pad of footsteps. She looked up and saw Daniel again. "You're here late," he said. She smiled. "I could say the same about you, Touche." He didn't sit, just leaned gently against the conference table, watching her laptop screen from a respectful distance. "Working on something big?" he asked. Lena hesitated, her hands hovering over her keyboard. "Kind of. It's just a rough idea for next week's onboarding redesign. I thought maybe I could make the interface more intuitive for new hires, but it might be silly." Daniel stepped closer, then looked at her design mock-up, bright, thoughtful, with a clean simplicity. "It's not silly," he said after a moment. "It's smart. People underestimate how much clarity matters." Lena felt a warmth rise in her chest. "You think so? I know so." He looked at her, not her work, but her. "You're not loud, Lena," he said quietly, "but everything about you says more than you realize." She didn't know what to say. He continued, voice lower now. "Don't wait for permission to speak louder. You already have something worth hearing." Then he nodded and turned to leave. But just before the door closed, he said without looking back, "I'd like you to present that idea to the board next Thursday. I'll put you on the schedule." The door clicked shut. Lena sat frozen. Her present to the board? She wasn't ready. She wasn't even on the leadership track. She had only just begun. But somehow, Daniel believed she could. And that belief, from someone who could have easily ignored her, ignited something she hadn't felt in years: hope. That night, she walked home through the cool city streets. Her steps felt different, as if she were slowly stepping into a life she hadn't dared imagine before. She didn't know why he had noticed her in that elevator. She didn't know why he kept checking in. But what she did know was this: her quietness was not a flaw, and sometimes a single encounter can awaken a life that's been quietly waiting to be seen. She stood in front of the tall glass doors, staring at her own reflection, as if it belonged to someone else. Next to her heart, inside her coat pocket, were 3 note cards, each holding a bullet point version of the idea she was about to pitch. Her palms were sweaty. Her breathing came in quiet, controlled patterns, and her mind, a storm of thoughts that wouldn't settle. Lena had never spoken in front of more than 10 people. Now she was about to pitch a user interface overhaul to a boardroom filled with some of the most powerful executives in the company, including the man who had asked her to be here in the first place, the man who had seen something in her she didn't know she had. Daniel Rain. What if he was wrong about her? What if she disappointed him? The hook came earlier that morning. She had arrived early, dressed in a simple but elegant gray blazer, her hair down for the first time, soft waves brushing her shoulders. Her colleagues had barely recognized her at first glance. Some smiled politely, others looked surprised that she was presenting at all. She heard one whisper as she passed, "Didn't she just start? What's she even doing on today's schedule?" Lena tried not to let the words sink into her skin, but they did, quietly, deeply, like invisible bruises. But then, just before the meeting began, a hand rested gently on her shoulder. She turned. Daniel stood there, calm as ever. He didn't say much, he never did. But the way he looked at her was grounding. "Whatever you do," he said, "don't speak to impress them. Speak to serve them." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means your job isn't to be perfect. It's to offer what only you can see. They already have enough people echoing each other. They need someone who notices things others miss." And with that, he walked in. She followed. The boardroom was intimidating. Massive windows overlooked the city skyline. A long black table gleamed under modern light fixtures. Around it sat 12 people in sharp suits, department heads, lead strategists, financial officers. Lena stood at the far end. As she stepped forward, the room quieted. Conversations stopped. Phones were turned screen down. She swallowed and began. At first, her voice trembled, but she didn't look at the entire room. She looked at one face, Daniel's, and anchored herself in the calm she saw there. She spoke about first impressions, about how the onboarding experience was a company's handshake, about how the interface new hires interacted with on their first day could shape their confidence. For months, she talked about clarity, simplicity, design choices that encouraged, not confused. Then she showed them mock-ups, color schemes that soothed, font sizes that didn't strain the eyes, button placements that made sense, step-by-step guides layered intuitively. She even quoted a line from her late mother: "Make the door easy to open if you want people to feel welcome." When she finished, there was silence. Then came the voice she feared most. Mr. Halston, head of corporate development. He was known for being precise, critical, and rarely impressed. "So," he said, tapping his pen, "you've been here 1 week?" "Yes, sir." "And you believe we've missed something crucial in a system our top consultants built?" She took a breath. "I believe sometimes those closest to a system stop seeing its blind spots. I'm still new enough to see the gaps." The room shifted. Someone smiled. Daniel looked down, hiding the faintest trace of pride. Halston stared at her for a moment longer, then nodded once. "Fair point." After the meeting, Lena returned to her desk feeling like she had just run a marathon, with her lungs full of gravel. She sat, silent, the adrenaline fading. Then came the email. Subject: "Your pitch." It was from Daniel. All it said was, "You just proved something powerful that quiet doesn't mean small. Be ready for Monday." She stared at the screen, heart pounding. What did that mean? Over the weekend, Lena went home to visit her father. He still ran a modest stationery shop outside the city, a quiet man himself, whose hands were always stained with ink, and whose stories were told more in looks than words. They sat on the porch Saturday evening, watching the sunset through the pine trees. She told him about the boardroom, about the elevator, about Daniel. Her father listened without interrupting. When she finished, he simply said, "Sometimes the people who notice others are the ones who most needed to be noticed." Once, she looked at him and knew he wasn't just talking about her. By Monday, things had changed. Her inbox was flooded with meeting invites. Senior designers asked her to sit in on brainstorming sessions. Her supervisor began deferring to her during certain reviews, and HR reached out asking if she'd like to speak at the next onboarding orientation. Word traveled fast. But so did judgment. By Wednesday, whispers had started. She must be special terrain. No one climbs that fast without a reason. She must have known someone before getting hired. It stung. Lena knew none of them saw the hours she stayed late, the weekends she studied company systems, the quiet panic she'd swallowed just to show up. She kept her head down again. She tried to ignore it. Until Friday. That was the day Daniel appeared beside her again, this time in the design lab. "Walk with me," he said. She followed him to the rooftop garden Magnar had installed for employees years ago. It was quiet. Above the noise of the city, wind brushed past, tugging at the silence. He leaned against the railing and said, "I hear the noise." She didn't pretend not to understand. "I'm not trying to stand out," she whispered. "I just wanted to do good work." "I know," he said. Then, for the first time, his voice changed lower. Not guarded, but raw. There was a time, he said, when I was 24, new to a firm, with 1,000 ideas and no voice. I was invisible in a room until I made them money. Then I became visible, but not for who I was, only for what I gave. Lena watched him closely. I told myself I'd never let someone with integrity get ignored if I ever had the power to change. That, he looked at her, a softness behind his usually unreadable eyes. You reminded me of that promise. She didn't speak, didn't know how. He continued, you're not here because of me, Lena. You're here because you were brave enough to speak when you didn't have to. That's rare and powerful. She blinked fast, the air thick with something unnamed. He gave her a nod and began to walk away. But before he disappeared, he said one more thing. They're going to talk either way, so give them something true to talk about. Lena stood alone on that rooftop a long time after, not because she was afraid, but because for the first time she was starting to believe the voice in her own heart was worth listening to. And this time, it was only getting louder. People always talked about power like it was loud, like it roared when it entered a room or demanded attention without asking. But Lena was beginning to learn that the most enduring power wasn't loud at all. It was quiet, gentle. It moved without needing to be seen, just like she had for most of her life, except now. The world had started to notice her. By midweek, Lena had been unofficially dubbed the voice of empathy on the creative floor. Her redesign pitch had triggered a ripple effect. Not only had HR begun auditing the onboarding process, but other teams started asking if she could give feedback on internal tools and platforms, too. People were listening to her, but something else had shifted to something she couldn't quite name. Daniel had become more present, not in obvious ways, not in grand gestures, but in smaller ones. He passed by her desk at least once a day, always with a thoughtful comment or a one-line question that lingered in her mind hours after. Once, he dropped off a book with a sticky note attached. Page 70 reminded me of the way you think. Another time, he simply left her a quote on her monitor. The most courageous act is still to think for yourself. Aloud. Coco Chanel. She never saw him leave them, but she always knew they were from him. And then there was the Thursday afternoon meeting. It was just past 5 p.m. when Lena was called into a last-minute brainstorming session with the core innovation team. She didn't know until she entered the room that Daniel would be leading it. He was standing by a whiteboard, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened slightly. He looked like someone who had been thinking deeply for hours but was energized by it. He nodded as she entered. Lena, he said, with the ease of someone inviting a friend into a conversation, not a junior employee into a high-level meeting. Pull up a chair. She did. For the next hour, they unraveled ideas, discussed user behaviors, talked friction points and digital experiences. Lena found herself offering suggestions naturally, boldly. She wasn't afraid in that room, not with him there. And every time she spoke, Daniel didn't just listen. He heard her, fully. When the meeting ended and others trickled out, he lingered behind. You know, he said, walking over to the window, people think change comes in big moves, but sometimes it starts with a shift as small as someone new joining the room. She stood beside him, looking out at the skyline. I think people underestimate how much someone quiet can see, she said. He turned his head toward her, a look in his eyes she hadn't seen before. It wasn't admiration, it was something quieter, something that asked, who are you really, without using words. What do you see? He asked softly. Lena looked down at her hands, thinking. Then she said, you carry something heavy, but you wear it well. Still, I can tell. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Then, in a voice so low she almost missed it, he said, my wife died 6 years ago. The words fell into the room like glass dropped on marble. Lena's breath caught. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded once, eyes still on the horizon. She was the only one who knew how much noise I carried inside. When she left, the quiet stopped being peaceful. There was a long silence between them, but not an uncomfortable one. Lena didn't speak to fill it. She didn't rush to console him. She just stood beside him, offering presence instead of pity. And maybe that was exactly what he needed. When he finally looked at her again, His voice was steadier. Most people talk because they want to be heard. You listen because you want to understand. She didn't know what to say, so she said the only thing that felt true. Maybe that's because no one listened when I needed to speak. Daniel didn't press. He didn't ask her to explain. But there was a look in his eyes, now a mutual recognition, to people from very different worlds, both shaped by silence, both surviving wounds the world didn't see. Later that evening, Lena walked home in the cool dark, the city lights blinking like quiet stars. She thought about his wife, about loss, about the way pain either hardens you or deepens you. And she realized something she hadn't before. Daniel Rain wasn't just powerful because he built an empire. He was powerful because he let people like her rise inside it. The next morning, something unexpected happened. She was called into HR. Her heart jumped. For a split second, old fears returned. Had she done something wrong? Had someone complained? But when she arrived, she was met with smiles. "We're creating a new cross-functional innovation initiative," said the director. "A bridge between creativity and leadership. Mr. Rain recommended you personally to co-lead it." Lena blinked. "Me, you'll have the freedom to build a team," the director continued. "Start from scratch. Choose people who think like you, who see what others miss. You'll have weekly access to him for mentorship." Lena sat in stunned silence. She had walked into this building just weeks ago as the shy girl from nowhere, too small to be seen, too quiet to be heard. Now she was being handed an opportunity that could change her life. But it wasn't the recognition that meant the most. It was knowing that someone believed in her before the world ever did. That evening, she found herself back in the elevator. Alone, that she pressed the button to the top floor. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And when the doors opened, Daniel was already standing there like he knew she'd come. She smiled softly. "I said yes," she told him. He nodded, stepping aside to let her in. As the doors closed, silence settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of everything unsaid, everything becoming, everything they were beginning to trust, not just in each other but in themselves. Most people don't realize when they're standing in the middle of a turning point. They look back later and say, that was the moment everything changed. But Lena felt it while it was happening. It was in the way Daniel watched her as she presented her first team idea on a Monday morning. No longer nervous, no longer second-guessing her voice. It was in the silence that followed after she finished. The kind of silence that didn't demand applause because everyone in the room had already felt the impact. It was also in the way his eyes lingered, not professionally, not casually, but with something else, something harder to name. For weeks, they'd been orbiting each other, drawn close by moments of meaning, shared silences, and words that spoke deeper than surface conversation. Neither of them said anything that would change what they were, but both of them knew something had already changed. The project they co-led became more than just a task. It became a space where ideas were born without fear, where mistakes were examined with curiosity, not criticism. Lena brought empathy. Daniel brought vision. Together, they created something no one else at Magnar had quite managed: genuine trust between leadership and creation. But outside that space, the world was louder than ever. Rumors had started spreading. Some quiet, some not. She's got to be more than just smart. You think she's the reason Rain's been skipping investor meetings? Watch her get promoted again next month. Lena heard it in elevators, in whispered bathroom conversations, in the way some people stopped making eye contact when she walked into the room. She said nothing, not because she didn't care, but because the words she would have said weren't ready yet. Her strength was still learning how to defend itself. But the worst came unexpectedly. A senior strategist, a man Lena had admired, cornered her after a conference call. "You're doing great things, Lena," he said. Tone to slick, smile to sharp, "but I wonder if your rise is as organic as it looks. Just remember, association can build you or break you." She didn't reply. But that night, she went home and cried, not because she believed them, but because it hurt that they needed to believe that she couldn't have earned this on her own. The next morning, she found an envelope on her desk. No name, no label. Inside, A single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a tabloid headline. City's billionaire CEO seen with new advisor. Just business or something more? The photo was blurry but clear enough. It was her and Daniel in the rooftop garden from 2 weeks ago. She remembered the moment. It had been quiet, vulnerable. The kind of silence you don't share with just anyone. Someone had taken it and twisted it. Her hands shook. Her stomach dropped. She looked around, wondering who had placed it there. Everyone looked busy, typing, talking, pretending. Lena stood slowly, paper still in her hand. She walked straight to the top floor. Daniel's assistant tried to stop her, but when Daniel saw her through the glass, he opened the door himself. "Close it," she said quietly. He did. She handed him the paper. He read it, then looked up. "Did you see who left it?" "No." His jaw tightened. She waited, half expecting him to be angry, to say they had to distance themselves, to pretend nothing had ever existed beyond mutual respect. But he did in single quotes T. Instead, he walked over to the window, holding the paper loosely. "They don't know how to explain a connection. They don't understand," he said finally. "So they give it the only name they can." "Why me?" she asked. Her voice broke. "You could have mentored anyone, chosen someone with more experience, more status." He turned to her then, and for the first time, there was no distance between his words and his truth. "Because I saw you before anyone else did. Because you reminded me what it means to begin again. And because somewhere along the way, I started looking forward to your voice more than I expected." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "Do you want me off the project?" she asked. "No," he said simply. "What do we do now?" Daniel walked to his desk, folded the paper, dropped it into the shredder. "We keep building. Let them talk." But Lena knew the storm was just beginning. Later that week, an internal email leaked. A blog post speculated about favoritism inside the company. The board called for an informal review, not just of Daniel's relationship with employees, but of how fast certain individuals had risen. She was asked to step back, temporarily, not because of her performance, but because silence was easier than defending the quiet truth. Daniel didn't fight it, publicly, at least, but privately, he sent her one message: "This isn't the end. It's the start of something. We'll rebuild better." So she waited, and while she waited, she did what no one expected. She began helping junior designers, voluntarily. She created a series of internal training videos, free of charge, to guide new hires. She hosted lunchtime Q, and as for interns, sat with people who felt invisible just as she had once been. The irony was that being pushed out of the spotlight gave her the freedom to shine brighter in the shadows. Daniel saw it all. He didn't speak of it publicly. But behind the scenes, he fought harder than anyone knew. He met with the board, quietly, persistently, not to defend himself, but to show proof: emails, project data, team reports that Lena's influence had improved retention, performance, innovation across the board. Still, the decision would take time. Then came the Friday when everything changed again. Lena was walking past the lobby when she saw Daniel, speaking to a group of young visitors, college students on a company tour. He didn't know she was there. She lingered in the shadows, unseen, listening. One student asked, "What's the best decision you've made as a leader?" Daniel didn't hesitate, not overlooking the quiet ones. He said, and then, without meaning to, he looked directly at her, only this time everyone saw. Some endings don't feel like endings at all. They feel like standing at the edge of something vast, both terrifying and beautiful, and realizing it's not an end, but a beginning you never saw coming. Lena felt it the moment she walked through the glass doors of Magnar again, this time not as a guest, not as a quiet intern, or a temporary silence in someone else's space, but as herself. Fully. Completely. Unapologetic. It had been 3 weeks since the board investigation. 3 weeks of being sidelined, silenced, and observed like a case study. And during that time, while she was off the stage, something strange had happened. She had become impossible to ignore. Her training sessions went viral within the company's internal platform. Her quiet leadership sparked a mentorship movement among junior staff, and the very executives who once questioned her presence began requesting her insight behind closed doors. They had tried to make her small, but she had used their silence to grow. The official word came on a Monday morning. An email, short, to the point, review completed, no breach of policy. Please resume project leadership immediately. Lena sat still, staring at the words. No one apologized. No one admitted the damage done. But they had cleared the way, and maybe that was enough. That same afternoon, she entered the boardroom where it had all begun. Half the faces were new. The other half looked up with something different in their eyes, respect. Not because of what they thought she might be to Daniel, but because of what she had proven herself to be without him. She presented 3 initiatives for the next quarter. All were approved. Not one question was raised about her credentials. Later that evening, as the building emptied, she took the elevator to the rooftop again. He was there. Of course he was. Daniel stood by the far edge, the wind brushing through his coat, city lights casting silver outlines around him. She approached slowly. He turned, and this time, he smiled without restraint. Welcome back, he said. She laughed softly. Didn't know I ever left. You didn't, he replied. But they needed to see who you were without me beside you. She nodded. Then, after a moment, she added, and maybe I needed to see it too. He looked at her like he always had, without pressure, without expectation, but with unwavering clarity. I've stood at the top of this company for years, he said, but I've never felt more grounded than when I was standing beside you. Something shifted between them then. Not a confession, not a declaration, just truth, uncomplicated, unafraid. She stepped closer. Do you know the first thing you ever said to me? She asked. He thought for a second. In the elevator? She nodded. He smiled. You're clutching your bag like it holds national secrets. She laughed again. And now you trust me with actual company secrets. He looked at her, serious now. I trust you with more than that. The words landed quietly. He didn't reach for her hand. She didn't move into his arms. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic kiss beneath the stars. There was something much rarer. A pause. An understanding. A beginning. Lena stepped to the edge of the rooftop, beside him, staring at the lights of the city she once thought was too big for someone like her. And then she whispered, It's not the elevator I remember most. He turned toward her. No. She shook her head. It's the moment you taught me how to breathe when I forgot how. Daniel nodded slowly, his voice soft. And now you teach others. She looked at him, eyes glistening not from sadness, but from knowing that she had become the kind of person her younger self used to hope for. That she had found strength not by standing alone, but by standing fully in who she was, whether the world was ready or not. And that sometimes the most powerful love stories don't start with fireworks or fate. They start with stillness. With noticing, with the courage to breathe again beside someone who never asked you to be louder, only braver. As the wind wrapped around them and the city pulsed beneath their feet, neither of them spoke again. They didn't need to, because everything that mattered had already been said in silence. And this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility.